Research tells us that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are at a higher rate of being involved with the criminal justice system, either as a victim or as an alleged offender or someone who has been convicted of a crime. We know that people with intellectual disabilities are at a 4 to 10 times higher rate of being a victim of some type of sexual crime. And we know that the research, although limited, suggests strongly that there is a disproportionate rate of people with intellectual disabilities incarcerated for some type of sexual assault. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is this? And what does the research tell us? And there have been a lot of studies. I'll take that back. There haven't been a lot of studies. There have been some good studies. Dick Sopsey started us off many years ago by bringing it to our attention with a number of people who have been victims of sexual violence and people who have been incarcerated for crimes that they may or may not have committed, but has said they did. And there have been other studies along the way, but we really lack good information about how many people are victimized, how many people are incarcerated, how many people are placed in lack of a jail into a state center or state residential facility, and how many have lost their rights. And we often don't think about losing their rights, but that's another issue that we need to think about. And research hasn't really addressed those issues to the extent that would help us develop really good interventions, because the last thing we want is we don't want people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, including autism, either becoming a victim or being charged with any type of crime. One of the things that we know when we think about people who have been charged with a crime is, one, it usually has to do with some type of sexual offense, or it's part of a robbery, something like that. And the reason that we see the numbers relating to robbery and burglary so high is that people want friends. And so a group of people will say to an individual with ID and say, hey, want to hang out with us? And the first thing they're going to say is, sure. Okay, so we're going to go in this store for a little bit. We're going to get some beer. We're going to buy some stuff. You just hang outside and let us know if you see a police officer walk by. And if you do, just, they have a signal, come in and let us know, or tip your hat, or do something. And sometimes they don't even ask, well, why do you want me to let you know? And if they do, and it's usually something around, well, we're really not 21, we're only 20, and we don't want to get, in trouble for trying to buy alcohol underage. Makes sense, okay. Little does the person know with the intellectual disability that they're robbing the store. And in the course of that robbery, somebody might be hurt. And just because that person with an intellectual disability was standing outside and was there as, in quotes, the lookout, that person is going to be charged the same as the other individuals. Now, will his disability be a mitigating factor? That depends on what happened. It depends on what state, jurisdiction, all kinds of things. But it's also very easy for someone to say, well, he was part of it, he goes off to jail. And for people who are victimized, both females and males, it's like, who do they tell? Who do they tell? And if they tell, will that person then call law enforcement? Will there be some action taken? And oftentimes people with intellectual disabilities have a difficult time with time and place. So for instance, you might say, Bev, what did you do this morning? And I could tell you, well, I got up, I came downstairs, I fed the animals, I did X, Y, and Z. Okay, and I'm going to tell you in a chronological order what I did. If I ask somebody with an intellectual disability, what did they do that morning? They might say they fed the dogs, they got up, they did X, Y, or Z. And so when they do it in that way, oftentimes we as professionals will jump in and say, no, wait a minute, you said you did the dogs first. You mean, how did you do the dogs? Don't you have to get out of bed first? And we'll try to arrange it in what we perceive to be the chronological order. And that confuses the person who's telling us what happened. So we need to let them tell everything. And when it's done, we will get a really good picture of what happened. And then if we have questions, we can ask. Law enforcement will say, because they've been trained, will say, when did it happen? What time? Where did it happen? What was the person wearing? They're going to ask all kinds of questions along those lines that are very important. And you and I might be able to tell them, but somebody with ID who's just been traumatized and with their processing issues might not. So maybe instead of saying, we can ask, what time did it happen? And if we're not getting a response, then maybe we say, okay, well, what were you doing? Were you coming home from school? Were you going to the grocery store? Something that will give us an idea of time. What do you normally watch on TV? You know, well, normally I watch X, Y, and Z on TV, and therefore we can place the time between this hour and that hour. It's not perfect by any means. Defense attorneys love those kinds of things because there's lots of way to poke holes in them, but it's a beginning step of making sure that people who are victims of crime and who are accused of a crime are able to tell their story in a way in which people believe them and understand how they're telling it. They're not trying to change the topic. They're not trying to lie. It's just the way in which they're recounting what happened. And in addition to that, when we talk about these things, we have to remember there are very different ways of perceiving things in different communities. So we have to remember the culture of the person, their ethnicity, just so many other issues that underserved populations face. So we had a young woman who was sexually assaulted in a workshop. And we wanted to work with a local rape crisis center to help her provide services, and said absolutely not, couldn't use the local rape crisis center. And it's like, well, why? Because they're really well respected and known. Well, this young woman happened to be of Russian descent, and it's a very tight community. And there are people from the Russian community who volunteer for that rape crisis center. And the fear was that if somebody said anything, the father would pull her out of the workshop and keep her at home, and no one would see her again, because having his daughter being a victim of sexual violence by somebody that she did not, well, she knew him, it was a staff member, but the family didn't know, was something that was an insult to the family. And in their culture, that's how they dealt with it. And so it took some creativity, and we went to another county and we explained the situation. And we said, but she can't come to you, because then how do we do that? And she would be missing from the workshop for so many hours, and people would tell her family, oh, where was she? Because she wasn't here. So we're going to have one of your counselors go to her. And then there are all kinds of regulations. Well, we don't like to go cross county lines, and we don't go to people. People come to us. And that's where interagency cooperation comes in. And you sit down and you try to work out a plan to benefit the person who's been a victim. And luckily, we were able to do that. Now, it took some time, but we were able to do that. So it's important when you're thinking about prevention and helping people that we need to think outside of the box and not just think of how we think of things, but think of someone's religion, their culture, their ethnicity, and how all that kind of folds in to how they feel about reporting or disclosing, about their comfort level with talking about sexuality, because they might not even know the words. We have the song that people sing, head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Well, wouldn't it be nice to have a song that said something like head, shoulders, breasts and testicles, knees and toes, so that people understand that those are just body parts. That's just what they are. It's a body part. But if they've been taught that those are, in quotes, dirty words, it's going to be hard for them to say to a police officer or a teacher that somebody did something to them. And if they can't tell, then what happens is the case just falls apart, but the perpetrator is out there and will do it again. So I think in thinking about what we need to do, we as professionals, particularly researchers, need to be more comfortable thinking about the role of sexuality and how it plays in researching the incidence and prevalence of violence against people with disabilities, and also the incidence of people being accused of crimes that they may or may not have committed, and what the intent was. And we really do need a lot of research about good interventions, because we don't have many. And we need to be able to do that. And we need to be able to take the information from like the CDC, who has told us that sex education is a great strategy for reducing the risk of victimization. So together with our researchers, our direct service staff, and one of the most important groups are our self-advocates, is that together we can make a difference. Individually, maybe here and there, but only working together are we going to be able to make a difference to reduce the risk of sexual violence, criminal activity, and people with disabilities being accused of crimes. Thank you very much.